Hi, I'm Jonathan Fields, and this is Good Life Project. My guest today is Samantha Hahn, who is an illustrator, artist, and author of a very cool new book called Well-Read Women. And we're going to really trace her journey, coming up as an illustrator, as an artist, and balancing this quest to really honor her art and honor the business and honor the personal side. So it's awesome to me hanging out with you today.
So happy to be here.
So you've had a really interesting journey. And we're living in New York City, and it's the art capital of the world, and there are all sorts of myths about how somebody comes up in the art world. What's kind of interesting is that I've had the incredible sort of pleasure of having a number of illustrators and artists on this show before, and it's fascinating how everybody has such a different journey about how they got to where they are, and yours is very different than anyone I've ever spoken to. Also, I think in part because a number of the people that I've known and spoken to before have come to it later in life and come into the field in a very sort of non-traditional way. And you have a very different experience.
Yeah, I think I was sort of born into it in a way. It just seemed like what I was always destined to do. And I think I had some roadblocks and some detours, and then now I'm home again, and it feels so right.
Yeah, so tell me what you mean by you were born into it.
Well,
take me back.
My mom was an illustrator, and I grew up in the city, so it just was completely natural to see. Both of my parents actually were in the arts, so it was really natural to see people doing what I do professionally. And it was a very, very, very different time coming up in the 80s, and the field of illustration was a totally different universe prior to the internet, prior to email. So I remember my mom messengering paintings to art directors using FedEx, and it just, or messengers coming and picking things up at our house. And now there's, I feel actually that there's a lot more control, because I can kind of control the process from beginning to end in terms of doing the painting and then doing the post work and sending it to the art director, communicating with them more directly, and kind of really being in control of what the final product looks like.
Right.
So
when you say you were born into it, you were literally born into a home where your parents were earning a living in the arts, which is so unusual, I think, for so many people. And was your mom, was she a fine art painter? Was she a commercial painter? Or do you make that distinction? I'm curious.
I actually really don't. It's interesting. I always think about this. I feel like in college, when I was studying illustration, it came up that people often think that illustration is sort of a bastardization of fine arts. And I actually think of it as like such a pure form of art, and that the intentions are totally crystal clear, and they're sort of, for lack of a better way to say this, naked, and that the purpose of it is to go along with text, or to inspire, or like titillate, or be compelling in some way, or be emotional or alluring, and that's enough. Whereas like with fine art, sometimes I think it's wrapped up in all these preconceived societal notions that it's solely coming from the artist's inner mind, and there's no purpose for it other than to do it, and then it just happens to be in a gallery or museum. But I think that all artists are doing work for a response, some sort of response in one way, shape, or form. And a fine artist is dealing just as much with the opinions and perspectives of society and the gallery and the buyers. And so I think illustration just can shed itself of all that, and that we as illustrators are working collaboratively with a publication, with whatever it may be, who has hired us to add something, to add a grace note.
Right.
And that's what we're here to do.
So, and is that what your mom did also?
Yeah, I mean, she did it, and she worked commercially for magazines and books and all the same.
So
all
you
the
were
same
exposed to like the coexistence of these two worlds from a really early
exactly,
age.
and that's why I think that's why it feels so natural to me, because the artistic process never felt like it was being. It didn't. She wasn't someone who felt like, oh, I wish I could just be oil painting in a garret somewhere. She was really happy with what she was doing and excited by it. And I think the whole process of getting an assignment, working with clients was fulfilling
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about it personally too.
I mean, which is so interesting because you have so many people where the idea is, okay, this is the art that I do to pay my rent.
Right.
And this is the art that I do to feed my soul. And I'm only doing this for as long as I have to do it so I can get to this other place.
That I feel totally opposite. I feel like this feeds my soul. I love the process of it. And it's the process to me is where the being an artist comes in. It's not every project is like the most fulfilling project of my life, but the feeling of being an artist, it makes me complete. And I like the anticipation. I like the pressure of deadlines. I like the interaction with a creative community. I like almost every aspect of being an illustrator. And I think I considered a little while like what it would be like to be a fine artist, and I feel like I tested the water a little bit, and it just didn't feel right to me.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you went like a fairly traditional route. You went to art school.
Yes. So I studied illustration. I went to Syracuse University, and the kind of work I was doing there was not at all similar to what I'm doing now. But I feel that, I got my 10,000 hours of practice, and being around a creative community, and it was a great experience. And I loved studying art history, and I loved everything about college. But I wouldn't say that it necessarily prepared me for the market of illustration that I would be entering later. And I think that was something that I had to learn through trial and error.
So in what I'm just so curious because I know so little about sort of like formal arts education. It's just not my background. I mean, I've been painting since I was a kid, but I've never had like a lesson, never done anything. So when you say it didn't prepare you, I'm curious what was missing.
Well, I think that the professors I had were excellent, and I really got to explore a variety of ways of working, and I put in a lot of time in each project and kind of came up with my process, which was my college process, not at all what my working world process is. But the world itself was shifting, as it is for I would tell anyone who's graduating today that you can't really prepare for the market when you're not inside it. And so I don't feel that that I knew the way my mom, for example, would promote her work was there was a big book called The Showcase of Illustration, and artists would take a page in the book, pay for it. I think it was like $4,000 or $5,000, and then it would be in a category like fashion or beauty illustration, and then art directors would find them in it. And now,
so there was it was like the yellow pages of illustration, and you had to pay just like you pay for an ad.
That's
yellow pages, and like everybody would go to that one book.
Right. I mean, I think that's like the way a majority of people did it.
Right.
And so when I entered the world, it was like, okay, here I am with my college portfolio.
Right.
Now what do I do? Oh, do I make some appointments with art directors? Okay, I'll try that. But the thing about being in the industry is that work begets work. So you have to just somehow break through that. There's like this barrier of entry. You have to sort of break through it and fill your portfolio with professional work. So it's a catch-22. Like, how do you get professional work without professional work?
So how do we do that?
For me, I mean, I think what my big hurdle was, well, I went to grad school for art education, and then while I was there, I did as my my need to fulfill that creative pursuit, I was doing figurative oil painting, and I was kind of thinking like, how do I don't really understand this illustration thing. I'll be an art teacher, and I will just paint on the side. Like maybe I'll have some gallery shows here and there. And I wound up doing a residency at the School of Visual Arts, and so I basically for a whole summer I just holed up and did all these oil paintings. And while I loved doing that work, I didn't really feel like they had a home, and I wasn't really that compelled by the whole community, the gallery community. While today, like I'd be happy to go to the Chelsea galleries and look around, it just didn't feel like my home.
Right.
And so I think I just needed to sort of do some soul searching and play around with different techniques and different styles, and I gradually moved away from oil painting and went back to like almost my roots, which were kind of working quickly, drawing, sketching, using concentrated inks and watercolors, kind of just for fun. And then I wound up getting like a little illustration job for this jewelry designer I knew. And then I wound up starting a blog. And then the blog sort of became like the major starting point for me, I would say, of like really finding my place, finding my niche, and finding my community.
Yeah.
Because it really became a platform for sharing work, getting feedback, and sort of get a little bit of exposure and get some of those early jobs, which were for, you know, independent jewelry designers or just friends that had an event to promote or something like that.
So you're talking about your blog being a really important part of your ability to sort of like break through the noise and actually start to build your career the way you want to do it. So many people are told to go out and build your own audience, start a blog, you know, start to take control. So many people do that, and I've had these conversations with artists, entrepreneurs, you know, professionals, you know, writers, and a lot of people go out and do that, and nothing happens. But for you, you had a different experience. So I'm curious, what was your approach to it that you feel made it work for you?
Well, I feel like when it doesn't work, I could start speaking to what you were saying about other people. I feel like you could write a blog in a vacuum. Just because you're saying something doesn't mean anyone's connecting with it. Yeah. You also have to reach out and connect with other people. So right. I feel like it wasn't just starting a blog, it was also connecting with people who I found interesting, or what they had to say interesting, or what they created, you know, and then sort of the community forums, and you start reading their blogs, they start reading yours, and you get kind of a feedback loop, and everybody wins. Yeah. I think as an artist, it is really a solo activity in terms of the process when you're actually doing the work. But I feel like everyone has the impetus to do it because of some sort of spark moment that happened in their life, and maybe it was being the best artist in their class in kindergarten and getting feedback from their friends, or, you know, being in college and having the excitement of being part of a studio of people, you know, exploring. Right. And then you kind of get out and you're just in the world, blowing in the wind, and so you sort of have to find a place to anchor you. And I feel like the blogosphere was that for me. It just helped me connect with like-minded, and it gave me a place to share. And, you know, it helped me grow, because from there, sometimes people noticed my work and I would get those first little jobs, and that's what you need to get started, those first.
So here's my question though. Totally get and agree with the whole idea of like it was a place to reform community and to gain exposure for your work. If you had started doing it 3, 4, 5 years earlier, so I think part of it is that, you know, like it's a great way to build community and build relationships that, you know, everybody helps everybody. But I think the missing piece of it, and I think what you've also sort of alluded to, is that you took time to develop the craft and to find your, I don't know if you would call it a voice as an artist, but to find like your lens, and to move from, you know, like what you were doing and say, no, that's not quite, yeah, this is it, and then get good enough so that when you start to showcase it on the blog, you had something really powerful to share. And I think a lot of people miss that step. But
that being said, I feel like it also you're growing and experiencing all the bumps along the way in a public place, which can be, you know, also really a vulnerable experience, because I think I'm growing today, but I feel good about my work, and I feel like everything in my portfolio is a good representation of me. And I feel like in those early days, even though I'd been honing my skills in school and throughout my entire life as a child, and even though I had been painting, you know, in grad school and starting out with illustration, you know, when I look back at my old work, it feels really embarrassing. It doesn't feel like a good representation
it's like my writing,
of me.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural, and I really hope that someday I look back on this work that I'm doing now and feel that it's not good enough. I really hope to always be growing and changing and shifting. And it's like, you know, of course you don't want to feel bad about yourself, but at the same time, you definitely don't want to feel like you've arrived and then stay there. I think like being static would be a very dangerous place to be. Yeah. Because the industry is going to shift and move, and you as an artist always need to be shifting and moving for personal reasons and professional.
So let's talk about that a little bit. because again, this is like, we keep bumping into these really interesting taboos and like the traditional art world assumptions. You know, like you paint what's in your heart, you do it, you keep it pure to you, and then you put it out into the world and hope and pray that, you know, it resonates. But fundamentally, you're painting for yourself. You're creating, you're writing, you're composing for yourself.
Sure.
And then the world responds. And you're saying not only like, you know, is the world it's almost like a co-partner in this with you, but as it moves, you need to keep your finger on the pulse of where it's moving and like keep the dance intimate along, you know, as it keeps moving.
Well, if it were true that painters, fine art painters, are only painting from within themselves, then why didn't it stop at Impressionism, or why didn't it stop at abstract expressionism? You know, why did those painters do their style and grow and shift from it? I think that artists are always going to do that individually, and then I think that as a group we do that. It's like this art is like an organism, and we're all like feeding off of it, sort of, or like a hive. You know, it's a hive, and in a sense, we're all, the internet and the blogs can be sort of like what help us, give us like the fuel for our internal fire.
Yeah, and I guess what's interesting also is, I'm almost backtracking on what I was saying before, but you know, so you were talking about the fact that there's this interesting dance between when do I expose my work and when don't I? So a mutual friend of ours, Lisa Congdon, who's been a guest also, did these really interesting projects where she basically said, look, I'm not good at this right now, and I know I'm not good at it, but the only way I'm gonna get good is if I do it every single day.
That's right.
And I'm gonna be publicly accountable. So like her blogging process in the early days was, I commit to actually creating something and sharing it with you every single day.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, a lot of people would be like, well, there's nothing good here, like why would people? But then I think there's a courage in that journey that draws people to want to follow along with you and almost live vicariously. Like, I wish I was that courageous. I want to see if it works out for this artist, because if it does, maybe I could do it.
Well, you have to be extremely brave to enter the art world, because it's a very resistant place to enter. And I think the people that succeed, I'm finding often, and my personal experience, are the people who can take rejection and learn from it, can grow from it. Because I think, you know, not all the doors are open just because you're good. You know, I think the cream rises to the top, definitely. So you could enter the world and know you're good. But I think it's more, I think that there's a lot of truth to the idea that you have good taste and you think, I see my own potential. I want to be as good as that person or as good as those people. And you also know in the back of your mind that you're not quite there yet. You just want someone else to see your potential. Yeah. And so you have to knock on those doors until someone does, or maybe they don't, and you just have to keep on doing it by yourself, posting it on your blog, you know, reaching out, just sharing it in any way you can. Because the only way that someone's going to see you is if you put it out in the world. Yeah. I definitely have a lot of experiences with people saying, I want to be an artist, but I don't like to, you know, promote myself. And, you know, the odds of someone discovering you while you're alone in your room are very slim. So you kind of have to take that leap of faith and just put yourself out there.
And it's like when you're saying about taste also, that like famous Ira Glass quote.
Yes, the Ira Glass quote, yeah.
Popped out to me. I don't remember it exactly, but it was
along those lines, that if you know, that you have the good enough taste to know that maybe you're not quite there yet, but that you can be.
Right.
And so you just keep on honing your skills.
Yeah, it's like closing the gap between craft and taste.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, of course, you know, like, is that taste something that you just have or don't, or is it something that gets developed? Is it you know, nature or nurture?
I think it's different for different people. I think, you know, for me, I was definitely born into an aesthetically minded family. You know, we went to museums and, like, you know, we observed the world, and that was just the way I was raised, to notice things, to look at them. And so I really value that upbringing, but I also think that there has to be a lot of, you know, nurturing it, and that doesn't even mean externally. I mean, you have to put the work in. You could nurture a child from the moment they're born, and if they don't feel the, you know, the passion for doing art or the impetus to do it, they might be an aesthetically minded person, but they are not necessarily going to be an artist.
So, interesting question then. Recently we were having a conversation with Christian House, who was a guest on the show, who's the top jazz violinist in the world. Fascinating guy. And we were talking about kids and like making them practice. And he was like, in the beginning, they have to practice. They're not going to have fun with it, but they have to practice. Eventually they'll develop a skill level where it becomes more fun, and then it becomes self-reinforcing. But he's like, he was saying parents, like, just make a kid sit down and practice. I'm wondering how you feel about that in the context of art, which is not like sort of like that linear music type of thing.
I studied art education actually in grad school. That's what I studied. And so I kind of come from the mindset that kids develop artistically at their own rate, and you can kind of expose them to art through presenting them with materials and opportunity to do it, but not necessarily with aesthetic education, in that you're teaching them this is what good looks like and this is what not good looks like. At the same time, I look at art from coming from other countries like Sweden and Japan, for example. Like I love so many Swedish artists, and even though their work might be different from each other, there's something there, and I don't know what their education was, but I feel that they must have had a lot of drawing training and a certain kind of drawing training and a certain kind of design education. So I feel like there's a balance. I feel like, if I could control the education system, I would love for art and design to be a part of the curriculum, but in a way that's also that's appropriate, developmentally, and allows for kids to explore and develop their own artistic voice within the system.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, let's jump back to your journey. You decide you kind of shift what you're doing, and you really start to focus more on the illustration side of things. Build your blog, start to build the community, and start to get smaller clients taking chances on you, or maybe just people that you have relationships with saying, "Here's a small job."
Right.
So how do you build from there, and where have you built to?
Well, while I was doing all of that, I was teaching art, and so everything I was doing was sort of like night projects, night work, and I wound up just traditionally sending postcards to Glamour magazine, sending emails to art directors that I could find their information. And really at that point it was magazines, because you look on the masthead and you see who to submit to. Versus now I get a lot of clients that through like advertising companies or branding companies, and it's not like, I don't feel that people just starting out in their career can necessarily just like reach out to ad companies. Although, if you really wanted to, you could contact ask about their art buyer. But I feel like in the beginning it's good to start sort of small and maybe find a niche in one area. So I started submitting to magazines and getting little jobs here and there, and that was kind of my first bite from the market.
Right.
And that.
So how long ago was this?
I would say that I would cite as like the real launch of like when things started rolling, and I would say that was about 5 years ago. So
do you think that's still a viable path now? 5 years in sort of like the digital world and the way things are moving is a long time. But not being in the world, do you see that as still like an interesting way for people to break in? Or has the world shifted substantially since then? I
get emails often from people that are just graduating, or people who want to shift and change in their career and become a freelance artist. And I always give the same advice, which is to basically, I think you do need to start a blog and just share your work, or submit to blogs and indie magazines for that initial exposure, and then submit the best way you can, do as much work as you possibly can. And then I always say, take everything I say with a grain of salt, because my path is not necessarily your path. I think, that's what's tricky about, studying art in college. You can gain a lot of skills, you can gain a lot of, like a beautiful network of people, but the market that you're entering is shifting so rapidly that your point of entry is going to be very different from even professors that you may have that are currently thriving in the same market.
Right.
Everybody's point of entry is going to be different. I think there are people who can graduate and jump right in if they have the right style that gets noticed at the right moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my path was a little bit, I mean, I don't even think 5 years is that long. I think sometimes it takes that long to build the momentum. I was working, I was getting work, but what I mean by, I think where I am now, I'm at the point where, you know, I really feel like this is my profession. I'm not struggling as much. It feels like I'm where I'm supposed to be.
So, so you built a pretty incredible career in a really cool way, like starting very traditional and then really leveraging the online community, and then but also still blending these traditional outreaches and mailing and doing all this stuff. Tell me a little bit about what you do like right now. What does your career look like right now?
Well, right now I feel like I've achieved a better work-life balance. I feel that in the beginning there was so much of I don't know how to put this, but it almost felt like an emergency. Like I wanted my life to be a certain way, and it wasn't that way. And so I was just clawing for it in like a really aggressive and like, you could call it aggressive or you could call it passionate. I just had a lot of drive and a lot of push to make it happen. And so I worked like it was like a do or die. I just put in so many hours to try to get where I wanted to be. And now I'm not resting on my laurels by any means, but I'm at the point where I have a nice volume of work in that so that I don't have to do as much of that outreach as I did before. Now it feels like a calmer, my focus can be truly on the work that I get and generating personal projects that I'm excited about. And I have enough of a platform that I can share it. It's there. Yeah. And the community is built so that if I had something that I want to say, I can reach out to somebody and say it. Right. And just putting in those foundation years of you can call it struggle, but or something else, you make it sound pretty, but it really is. You have to. I think when people ask me how do you get to this place in your career, it can take time. So if you don't have a sort of fortitude for a little bit of pain, then maybe it isn't the right career for you. But it can pay off very well in the end, in that people have seen your work and they reach out to you for it, which is really validating to know that clients that I'm excited about are excited about me, and there's a mutual admiration going on.
Was there a moment where you kind of said, oh wait, the work is just coming to me now? And was there a moment where you realized I'm moving out of struggle mode into I'm moving this abundance mode of the work is coming to me, and it's almost like I'm more about choosing the work I want now? Yeah,
I think it took my husband kind of saying it to me. I don't think I noticed it as much. I think I still have that instinct of well, it's never good enough. It's never going to be, I can't really be fully satisfied. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be at a place where I'm this is exactly what the perfect career looks like. I've arrived, I'm done. But I definitely, in the last 2 years or so, sometimes my husband would see me taking on so many projects and working, pulling an all-nighter and just asking me, well, why? Why are you doing this? And that, I think it was that question that made me kind of stop for a minute and think about the choices I was making and realize that I had choices to make, that I could be a little bit more selective about the projects I took, and I could take time for personal projects and bring them to fruition, whether it was simply for the personal satisfaction of doing it or for a commercial end. And that was sort of exciting. So I would say basically the last 2 years or so have been really a really exciting time where I feel more in control of my life, and I feel like I've laid enough groundwork that I'm not on such I think I feel like I'm always on a precipice. I could always fall off if I don't stay focused, if I don't stay vigilant about being good. But I definitely noticed more balance.
I mean, it's so interesting that you say that, because here you are, you're in a position where a lot of people aspire to be, and you still feel like your words were like, not being good. And you've got people coming to you telling you you're good, you're good enough. Like, we're giving you work enough so that you get to choose, and that you get to say no, because part of the time you just want to do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And in your mind, it's still like, but that can go away.
Oh yeah, I don't think, it might just be me. Maybe you speak to artists who are just like, yeah, this is great, I'm great, it's wonderful.
I don't think I ever have.
I think there's a bit of an artist, masochistic thing, and I think because we all know how hard it was to get here, we know how easily it can go away. Mm. So I think, there has to be a sort of alertness at all times.
Mm. Do you think you'll ever be at a point where you just kind of like kick back and say, I'm really good?
I can't even imagine it. Actually, you mentioned Lisa Congdon, and I just like on Facebook mentioned that I threw away I was like cleaning out my studio area and threw away a bunch of work that was older and that I just don't care to show or sell or do anything with. And she was like, well, what about your retrospective? And I thought that was hysterical, because I just don't think that way. I think of my work as ephemeral, and to me it's really about the process of doing it and the excitement and anticipation of working with an exciting client and seeing it come to fruition. But I can't imagine, feeling like I've accomplished it. I don't think that there really isn't it. I hope that I'm continually excited by what I'm doing, and I hope that that my goals can shift. I don't know exactly what my next goals are. So that this actually feels like it's a bit of success in that I feel like I've achieved a lot of what my goals were. And so now my task at hand is to try to enjoy this, try to take pleasure in where I've arrived, and then to think about what the next course of action is, because I just don't think as an artist that you can really ever rest on your laurels and say, this is good, I did it. Because what is it?
So is what drives you now fundamentally continuing to find out what the next thing is, or?
I think at this point my book is about to come out, so I'm watching a project that I've been working on for a long time come to fruition, which is interesting because most of my projects, even if they are like an ongoing project, are relatively short term. So this is like the thing I've worked on the longest, and I'm watching that, and I feel like when that happens, I'm going to have to think about what else. I'm going to ferry something through, and then I'm going to, come up with another plan of action. Because I think that's the excitement. I think, as an illustrator, part of it is about the chase and the anticipation and the pressure. I think I kind of thrive on that, and so I like having challenges ahead of me.
Interesting. So let's talk about your book, since we kind of like circled around to it. Tell me what it's about.
I started it about 2 years ago. I had a solo show, and I did all these, like a series of vignettes. Like I did probably, hundreds of pieces for the show, and sometimes they were on small pieces of paper, sometimes bigger. And one of the series I did was some of my favorite female characters from literature. And I just noticed how people sort of were gathering around the characters that I illustrated and discussing who their favorite was and what they thought about my portrayal. And I just, it struck me like there's something here. And so I wound up doing a book called Well-Read Women, Portraits of Fiction's Most Beloved Heroines, and Chronicle Books is publishing it. It's coming out in September, and it features my illustrations of 50 characters and quotes, hand-lettered quotes from their dialogue. So it was a really exciting and interesting and challenging project.
So it's kind of so interesting when you shift to really like fast little projects to a book is, well, this is, I guess the original idea was 2 years ago.
Right.
And now the book process is generally like a year to 2 years to actually create the whole thing. I'm curious also, with the 50 women that are in the book, Are they mostly alive or dead or some combination? Like, did you have access to any of them, or did you try and get access?
Well, they're fictional.
Oh, okay.
They're all, from, so.
That kind of makes it hard to have access.
Right. So, I mean, some of the ones I did initially were just some of my personal favorites. And then when I got the book deal, it became time to start thinking about, like, well, who else? Like, who do people respond to? And, like, why are these characters, I think of them as people, so I call them women, but why are these characters so fascinating and compelling to us? So
who are some of them? Like, what are...
I have some of the young ones, like Anne Shirley and Wendy Darling and Pecola from The Bluest Eye, and then I have Edna from The Awakening, and Lolita, and Anna Karenina, and 50 of them. It's so funny whenever I start talking about it, I'm like, I forgot. So, and then quotes from their dialogue, Daisy Buchanan, quotes from their dialogue that kind of really depict their emotional state.
That sounds like it would be so much fun, because it's just like you're getting into the head of each one of these.
Yeah, and it was interesting because to me, they all kind of they're so similar to each other in a way, and who they're trying to be. They're trying to navigate their time and the constraints of their society. They're trying to find love, find themselves, find their place in the world, and I think we all are. Yeah. So I really identify with so many of them. So
it's like it tells the story of all of us and of you.
Yeah. It's true, and I'm so lucky that I live in the time that we do, where as a woman I can do art and promote it and be a wife, be a mother, be an author, be have a voice in the world. Yeah. And I feel like so many of these women are struggling to convey their ideas. So
you mentioned that you're a mom. Curious how becoming a mother changed your perspective about your career, about how you create art.
I think it really actually propelled me forward, because I think there's a natural fear that becoming a parent is going to curtail your success, because it does put up a roadblock. You have another person who's 100% reliant on you for everything, including just emotional availability. And you have to devote your life to this person, and yet your passion and yourself are still so essential to being a whole person. And so you find a way to build your life around the things that are important. And I think, I always think, like, people are always talking about the work-life balance. And I kind of think of the work-life balance as not having a perfect work-life balance at all times, but having moments where work is, the most important thing and the thing that you're so focused on, and times when your life is. So I feel like when your child is very young, there's no choice but to focus almost all of your energy there. But now, my son is 3.5 years old, and I've built my career around him so that I live and work the life that I want. And we've structured our family and our life in a way that we get to do that. And so I think earlier on, when I was kind of trying to balance two careers, I was teaching and I was working at night on art and trying to blog, and then deciding to become a mother forced me to look at what my future was going to be, and make choices in my life that would allow me and my family to have the life that we wanted. Yeah. So we built it.
Which is the perfect segue to a final question. It's just, so the name of this project is Good Life Project. So if I offer that term to you, to live a good life, what comes up?
To live a good life is, to me, to be excited by your world, to be compelled by the people and the things in your space. And so I've situated myself in New York City, the center of the universe, and I have a beautiful family that I love and adore, and a community around the world of artists I admire, and projects that thrill me. that's a good life.
I like that. So thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's been my pleasure. So I'm Jonathan Fields. My guest today has been Samantha Hahn, and signing off for Good Life Project.